Welcome back to the Warcraft news, everyone. It has been a heavy week. Let's get stuck in. And before I do the really big ticket item, which is the very chunky Wowhead interview with Ian and Morgan that covers really big topics, first, we have some other bits and bobs, like the pre-patch dates. Now, we don't have an exact solid date just yet, but we kind of may as well have. So this splash screen just went live over on the beta, and it says this: Radiant Echoes vanquish foes from Azeroth's past as memories resurface, available July 30th. Yep, Radiant Echoes is the pre-patch event. You fly around Azeroth, she relives her traumatic memories, or as we call them, sort of fun boss fights and quests that get us loot. So, July 30th, is that the date? The answer is actually no, because if it went live in July 30th, then it wouldn't say available July 30th, it would say available now. That can only mean one thing, that the pre-patch will actually happen before the event goes live. That is, of course, what Blizzard usually do, and I can't see them delaying it more than, like, a single week. That makes me think that the pre-patch date is most likely July 23rd. And if that's not evidence enough, Blizzard are also retiring guild services from the shop in WoW. Guild and Realm faction transfers are no longer relevant in the game, and the retirement date is, you guessed it, July 23rd. That is the closest that we can have to an official confirmation. And if you want the closest that you can have to cross-realm, but IRL, check out today's sponsor. Longtime channel supporter Squarespace. They are the online site builder with amazing templates, tools, and features that get your web presence started right. And you can go to squarespace.com/BellularGaming or just click the link down below to start a free trial, and then code BellularGaming gets you 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. Now, as I've said before, you can use Blueprint and Fluid Engine to make an amazing site super easy. Today, here's how they support your business needs. So, if you're doing a store, e-commerce, Squarespace handles that, whether that's physical goods, where Squarespace will talk to your fulfillment center, or digital goods, they've got that. And if you're doing services, well, they can help you manage your invoices and things like that. And not only do your customers get a great website experience on all their devices, they also get flexible payment, credit cards, PayPal, Apple Pay, and in eligible countries, buy now, pay later methods like Afterpay and ClearPay. And of course, to help you optimize and run your own business, their analytics give you your top traffic sources, help you understand your reach, track your sales data, and learn where to focus your efforts. And again, whether you're selling products or services, they have so many features. They can do reservations, be that digital or physical, takeout, food delivery. Maybe you want a bio site to help promote yourself over in your social media. They have that and so much more. And if you go to squarespace.com/BellularGaming, you can get a free trial. Just click the link down below. With that free trial, you can build your site, and when you're ready to send it live, get 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain with code BellularGaming. So July 23rd is the date. Mark it in your calendar, get your add-ons, your UI, key bindings, and new talent sorted out, as well as warband stuff like shared reps, achievements, and transferring currencies, all of that good stuff. And also, don't forget to enjoy substantially increased leveling speeds. This is a really interesting one because the XP requirement to hit 70 is being cut by 54% with pre-patch, but Mob Remix is still active. And that does mean you'll probably be able to level a full alt in like 90 minutes or 2 hours. Like, it's probably the most insane leveling will ever be, 270. So that's going on, and of course, make sure to set aside some time to farm the event to get your pre-patch cosmetics, some Warbound gear for all of your alts, and of course, the excellent Echo Chaser title. Okay, with that said, let's dive into this interview. It's a great one. I had sat down with Ian and Morgan to hit them with some controversial topics in Raiding and Mythic Plus, and the answers are not to everybody's liking. I would say that some of that's probably because these are sort of tricky problems to solve. Let's dive in. So the first thing they went over was the private ores debacle, and there's not any form of massive update there. Blizzard basically know their answer to the weak aura problem was applied way too widely in Dragonflight, and that caused problems. The real issue, right, is when the fight designs were giving people the desire and often the need to solve it via add-ons and macros, so they say they're only going to use that where they know it's not going to be causing those problems. Basically, this is what we're going to do, but we'll do it better than last time. That's essentially the answer. Now, on the topic of difficulty, WoW had asked about Mythic raid nerfs being slow and sometimes a bit heavy-handed with Emir Drasil, and they mostly responded by saying the nerfs are actually kind of necessary right now. That's because of the skill gap between the top end and the lower end of Mythic guilds. It's actually pretty huge, but this time they do want to time the nerves better. Now, on the topic of item level progression and how it relates to difficulty, particularly in the issue of very dedicated players actually getting maxed out very quickly in terms of power and removing the whole slightly stronger each week part of raiding and therefore requiring later on nerfs for progress, Ian and Morgan basically soft announced a new power scaling system. Kind of interesting, basically, whenever you complete a weekly quest, likely a raid-specific one, your warband will get a little bit of a buff in the raid, growing up to around 20% or so through the course of the season. Now, Morgan compared it to the re-origination array in Uldir, which basically was a stacking stat buff that went up every week that you killed at least 3 bosses. So, fairly interesting. It's a discussion we've been having for years. I mean, I remember, say, the Icecrown Citadel stacking buff. In an ideal world, this means they won't need to apply as many nerfs to the raid, but that being said, sometimes in Mythic, it is less about the tuning of something and it's more about the design being inherently extremely hard. Okay, the next topic then is the biggest one, and it's very much the controversial one. It's the topic of healing. Healing is just not having a good time right now in World of Warcraft. Every high-end healer main has basically been voicing displeasure at the current state of the role. They have been doing so for months, if not longer actually, and feedback has mostly been around one-shot mechanics and DPSs having too many defensives. Now, that might seem a bit weird if you're a DPS. You're thinking, wait, what? The healers want to nerf me, but my defensives help them. But that's actually the problem, because a good DPS with perfect defensive use is very hard to kill. So, for enemies to pose a threat, Blizzard need to just do loads of damage. And that means healers have got very little time to respond to somebody almost being one-shot, and to then make sure that people are actually topped up before even a trickle of damage goes out, because some sort of overlap could end up being fatal. But of course, the flip side of that is that players with bad defensive usage just die, but the healer can't really do a lot about that because the mob's damage is so cranked up, because it's kind of expecting the DPS to be good at using their defensives. And then on top of that, so many specs have got self-healing and leech that kind of means that healers are either in a situation of immediately needing to save people right now, you know, full emergency mode, or they're just left twiddling their thumbs pressing damage filler spells. So basically, it's a big shit show, and it has been for ages. Now, Ian says that they're aware of this stuff and they're trying in War Within to rebalance people's health pools and to slow some of that healing down. And in an ideal world, that would basically mean that people take damage a bit slower. As a healer, you heal them up slower, but overall the time scale of things is not as just absolutely kind of crunched together as it tends to be right now at the higher level. Essentially, people want to be managing people's health rather than playing a game of reactive whack-a-mole. Now, on the side of defensives, of course, it's not an easy solution. Ian talked about how with all of these defensives, actually, you can't just remove them because they're really valuable in content like Delves. So in a world where you rebalance the defensives and the whole game around making Mythic Plus healing perfect, well, guess what? In Delves, maybe some people would be feeling kind of awful. And from playing Delves on the beta, I can confirm, we can confirm, your use of defensives is a really important part of doing Delves at a higher level of difficulty, and that actually makes it fun. So if they nerf the shit out of all of the defensives the DPS has had, then it would absolutely make Delves a worse experience. But Ian also says the designers have got to hit players hard and fast to account for all of those defensive abilities. It's kind of like an arms race between the classic team and the encounter team in a way, and that's why Ian mentioned an ongoing disarmament, but he did say they're not going to do things like a defensive prune. That's what some people have been calling for, and they've had very good arguments to back that up. Thing is, though, what if you do a defensive prune and then people go into a delve and it ends up being less fun and their class just feels worse and less capable? And that's always the problem with Holy Trinity gameplay. The more that you make each role very limited and defined, then the more that those roles rely, of course, on their allies. But when everybody is a little bit more like Superman with loads of defensives, then we just get into that arms race getting worse and worse. If you would like a deeper dive into this, I highly recommend Jack's breakdown video. It'll be linked somewhere. It's a great video, so do check that out. On the Mythic Plus front then, they talked about affixes. The good news is there will be, quote, pretty significant swings in how we approach affixes and the Mythic Plus system. Coming to the beta soon, but Ian did not want to do specific spoilers. Now, talking about why affixes exist, he say they're there for variety, not just to add difficulty, and that they think they figured out a pattern. For people who just want to chill and play some M+ with their friends every week, a little bit of variety can be welcome. But for people who are far more performance and results oriented, the variety actually takes away from their want to do that, because you want to do the same thing again and again and again and get better at that with fewer things kind of modifying that experience, which I can very much understand. Yes, for many people variety is fantastic, but if you take, say, a game of a radically different genre and you want to speedrun that game, game, well, if you have too much variety, then you actually don't really get into the flow of speedrunning as much, and yeah, it ends up being a kind of a different game. Of course, this is not really apples for apples, but I do understand what Ian is saying. Now, on that front, they do have plans to reduce variation for people who are doing higher keys and actually want to push, and we'll hear about those soon, but they do not think that removing affixes altogether is the right answer. Now, what's great is Wowhead then pressed them on Sanguine and Bolstering and why those still exist, despite Blizzard's goal to make the dungeon matter more. And Morgan basically explained their reasoning, but then he said, quote, "We are taking a big step back and revisiting all of that with our next iteration." So who knows, maybe Bolstering and Sanguine might actually be defanged or removed from the game. I mean, at least as personal feedback to what they're saying, as somebody who does just want to chill and do some M+ with my friends, there's never a time that Sanguine or Bolstering has actually made that feel better. Moving on to the final Mythic Plus topic, they talked about CC. Using stops, spells like Displacement and Stuns, that was changed, right, to properly put enemy spells on cooldown in Dragonflight, whereas before, basically an enemy would just cast again and again and again until they were actually properly interrupted. Basically, that used to be the difference between just stunning an enemy to interrupt them and then using a proper interrupt. Now, WoW had asked if they had any plans there because it gives classes with big AoE crowd control a massive advantage, even for things that immediately break, like say Blinding Sleet. And the answer WoW had got is that they're actually going to revert this because stunning a cast on a player doesn't put the spell on cooldown. But if you do it in an enemy, it does put it on cooldown, and basically they feel that that is inconsistent, right? That the game logic is not consistent between players and mobs. Now that's kind of worrying with the sheer amount of dangerous casts that are in dungeons on the current Mythic Plus design, and Blizzard's response is that they're just going to adjust for this, right? They're going to make sure that cast times and cooldowns are adjusted so that you don't feel like, the change in behavior kind of ruins your ability to do content. And I know that that may just seem to many people like a trust me bro answer, but like at the end of the day, when it comes to implementing a video game, it is the implementation of balance of the very minute details that actually make the difference. They're literally just going to have to be careful and get it right. Though I suppose if you're a DPS that's just enjoyed having a really big AoE stun, like, yeah, it's gonna feel shitty because you're just less powerful. Now to finish off the rest of the interview, here are a few highlights. They have no plans to remove boss parry from all bosses, which is kind of interesting. I mean, Morgan may as well have just said melee skill issue, which is kind of hilarious because like raid bosses do love dropping thousands of swirlies per second. Now Ian said we're also not likely to get any more raid buffs despite DK and Shaman being the only two missing one, and the team are trying to make sure that everyone is valued. Morgan then said that hero talents will continue to get visual updates and polish as the expansion goes on if it makes sense to do so, rather than it just being a one and done thing. They're considered to be evergreen, so they're getting a proper treatment. Then they also said that they know they need to improve the visuals of mechanics. They talked a bit about that. There was no real news except that we're not going to be seeing anything overly gamey. Maybe the way that in, say, Wildstar, or I suppose more contemporaneously, like Final Fantasy XIV, where it's extremely clear where like a spell is going to be. They don't want to do that for World of Warcraft. They still want things to be very much fantasy forward, not just you playing a UI mapped onto the world. But Ian did say he recognizes that fighting a fire guy on a lava floor while dodging a bunch of positional fire swirlies is I mean, yeah, probably a little bit too much to ask. So there we have it. That's the interview done, and that is actually the news in terms of main topics, except technically it isn't. Here's the deal. There's a fairly major spoiler thing floating around. It has lore implications, and I didn't want to do just a short little segment on the news, so we've wrote it up to be like a proper full video, but also because it is spoilers, I'd rather do it in like a separate video where it's very clear that it's spoilers, so that you're not like, not misled or not spoiled on what the content is going to be if you don't want to be spoiled. That video will be going up tomorrow, so look forward to that. But with that being said, thank you very much for watching today's video. I hope you found these things to be interesting. Seriously, like, let me know what you think. I mean, the healer issue, it is important. It literally impacts all of us. I mean, when you basically have this crazy arms race that is going on, very much driven by people at the top end of World of Warcraft being so bloody good at the game, then you just get a weird situation with the balancing of abilities. And this does happen in so many games. So in League of Legends, right, you'll have characters that have got higher win rates at lower leagues because, I mean, some of them are easier to play. In Overwatch, as an example, Reinhardt does really well, or at least traditionally, Reinhardt would do really well at like low MMRs. The MMR is like the sort of skill rating. So for newer, like lower skill players, maybe more casual players, Reinhardt just goes in and smacks everyone about with his big hammer. For pro players, though, they can just completely, just play around Reinhardt and make him half useless, meaning that his pick rate decreases as difficulty increases. Now, in a game like that, in a way, you could say it's sort of fine, but as mapped to World of Warcraft, you then have this problem where yeah, characters feel really strong. There are loads of defensives and lots of utility. People can do that perfectly at a Mythic plus 15 or something. But then if we prune and balance characters around making that gameplay experience ideal, will it be a better game for the rest of us? I mean, the answer is probably not, and that inherently is the problem of Blizzard's fundamental design with Mythic Plus. It scales up and up and up and up until basically you make the numbers break, and then you've got to cheese your way around the numbers breaking. Now, I totally understand why that is absolute video gaming crack to some people, in the same way that others absolutely love like speedrunning Mario 64, and they've literally been doing that for like 20 years. But that's not the game for most people, yet we're all playing the same classes with the same mechanics. It is actually a bloody hard problem for them to solve. And I suppose for those writing the character of Superman, they would use kryptonite or something, and it kind of comes back to that problem. Whenever a player or a character is very strong and OP and can do everything and is the best and is so cool, then how do you challenge that character in a way that is fun and enjoyable? Let me know what your solutions are to the problem. I'll see you next time.